Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We'll begin in 30 seconds to allow all the participants to be admitted and for everyone to get settled. Okay, I think we're good to go. Okay. My name is Jessica Gall. I'm the chair of the Professional Development Committee of the APA Illinois chapter. I'm joined by APA Illinois Executive Director Paula Fries, and we're excited to have Roxanne Anderson from the Kansas State University TAB program as our speaker this afternoon. Roxanne is joined by Sally Gladwell from Manick and Smith Group. Together, they will challenge us to think outside the box to find solutions to spur development in our community. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Before I introduce our speakers, just a couple of housekeeping items. This webinar is worth 1 CM. So we will include a link in the chat so you can easily log your credits during the meeting or right after. Just so you're aware, this presentation will also be recorded and you'll get a link to that recording later on as well. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type them into the chat. We're hoping we have a little bit of time at the end of the meeting for a Q&A, but please feel free to input your questions at any point during the webinar as you have them. We'll be monitoring the chat. If we don't get to a question during the event, we ask that you include your name with your question just so the speakers can follow up. So if there's something that you want them to follow up on, they're happy to do that. And then one last reminder before I introduce our speakers, registration for the 2025 APA Illinois State Conference is open. This state conference will take place this fall, October 8th to 10th at the Old Post Office in Chicago. So please join us for 3 days of sessions, workshops, and networking with your Illinois peers. And you can find more information on our website, ilapa.org. To introduce our first speaker, Roxanne Anderson is a passionate community advocate with experience spanning state, federal, and nonprofit sectors. She specializes in helping communities access funding, technical support, and resources to tackle complex challenges. Roxanne takes a collaborative, holistic approach to planning, bridging gaps, fostering connections, and championing innovative place-based solutions. Her work is grounded in empathy and a deep belief in the power of people to shape their future. Outside of planning, she finds inspiration in nature and once through hiked the Appalachian Trail with her husband, gaining fresh perspective from the trail and the hiking community. Roxanne is joined today by Sally Gladwell as well. Sally Gladwell has been at the forefront of environmental transformation for over 3 decades, blending science, strategy, and community insight to spark change where it's needed most. As a senior vice president and principal at Manick and Smith Group, she brings 31+ years of experience driving urban revitalization, guiding environmental due diligence, restoring natural resources, and championing sustainability. Both of our speakers today have a wealth of knowledge to share. We're grateful to have them with us today. So I'll hand it over to you, Roxanne.
Thank you, Jessica. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're here to rethink how communities approach vacant, abandoned, and underused properties. And in today's market, waiting for a developer to come along isn't really a strategy, it's more of a stall. So this session is about how you can catalyze change, activating properties before a buyer is even in sight. So Kansas State University's Technical Assistance to Brownfields program, or KSU TAB, is here to help communities and tribes transform brownfields into community assets. Our services are free and tailored to your needs, whether it's grant writing, site inventories, or community visiting. We are located across the country and in every region. We are funded by US EPA grants. And so we either have a tab that is local to your region, and we also have a national tab. And this kind of gives a list of who those are. And if you need connected to your regional tab, you can always contact me and I will send you that way. Your feedback is really important to us and always helps us improve. So at the end of today's session, please take a minute to fill out this very quick survey using this link or the QR code. We want to know how we can support your community better and what more information we can do to better get it to your doorstep. So KSU TAB Services offers more than just technical advice. We provide capacity building workshops, outreach strategies to engage your community, and site-specific assistance for assessment, cleanup, and reuse. It's really about empowering you and the community with knowledge, resources, and tools to lead your community's transformation and connect you to those tools. So here's a list of a lot of those services. I'm not going to go through them all, but they're here for your reference when you have the slides afterwards. And they are by no means comprehensive. We adjust our services based on the needs of the communities we work with. So legally, a brownfield is a property where redevelopment is complicated by real or perceived contamination. But for communities, it boils down to this. These sites are untapped potential, waiting for local leaders and communities to take action. So in simple terms, a brownfield is a site that's tough to redevelop because people think it's contaminated. This could mean anything from petroleum and asbestos to mold or former meth labs, but often it's the fear of contamination that stops progress, not the contamination itself. So it's important to understand that stigma is a very powerful barrier in communities. Many properties are sidelined simply because of a perception of contamination. Although through environmental assessments, you can clear up these misconceptions and unlock the site's true potential by knowing what you're working with. And redeveloping brownfields makes a lot of financial sense. There's funding available, existing infrastructure you can leverage. These sites often sit in prime locations, many times in downtown corridors. And every brownfield reclaimed is a step toward a stronger tax base, new jobs, and a revitalized community. So start with what you know. You can engage community stakeholders, revisit your comprehensive and revitalization plans, and physically tour your town's gateways and corridors. Tax delinquent parcels and overlooked properties often hide the greatest opportunities, and we're going to go through a few tools to help with this in a little bit. So briefly going into the brownfield redevelopment process, redevelopment is not just about cleaning up contamination. It's a strategic process that requires collaboration. There's many steps involved and success depends on public involvement and having the right players, planners, community leaders, economic developers, all working together towards a common and shared vision. So a lot of times, as you already know, taking into account your master plan and your community plan with redevelopment, this can help you narrow down on your core goals for your community that have to do with jobs and services, transportation options, housing, schools, public spaces. Once you know what you are looking for and what you need the most in your redevelopment, you can target that. All right, so we're going to take a quick pulse check. And we're going to launch a few poll questions throughout the sessions, not just to keep you engaged, but also to help us better understand where your community stands with brownfields. So these are anonymous, quick, and hopefully will give you insight into what your peers are also facing. So we're going to dive into the first 3 questions. If you guys want to take a minute to fill them out, I will touch base. All right, so let me look at the poll results. Thank you guys so much for taking time to weigh in. So your responses really help us understand the range of experiences in the room, and hopefully it'll also help you understand who else is here and what their base of understanding is and their starting point. Whether brownfields are on the top of your mind or just emerging on your radar, one thing is clear. progress starts with knowing what you're working with in the first place. So that's where environmental assessments come in. So we're going to talk about some of these tools that help communities cut through the uncertainty and confidently take the first step towards reuse. So for those of you who are not familiar with environmental assessments, a phase one environmental site assessment, or ESA, is a non-intrusive assessment. They involve reviewing records, site visits, interviews, just to understand a property's history. It's essentially a roadmap for what comes next. It's not a commitment to costly cleanups, but more of a key step to reducing the uncertainty and knowing what you're working with to move forward. A phase two reveals potential concerns or dives into the potential concerns revealed in phase one, and it follows up with any sampling of media to confirm if contamination is present and then how much is present. This information shapes cleanup strategies and helps communities make informed decisions about site reuse. These are two very important pieces of information for any brownfield that you would have. So the future use of a site could reflect your community's evolving needs. So whether it's housing, parks, or commercial space, brownfields provide opportunities to fill gaps in services and create jobs and support economic development in a way that's intentional and community driven. But you have to know what you have in order to be able to move forward with that. So with that, we're just going to take another quick poll. And this time we're looking at your priorities and values when it comes to brownfield reuse. What kinds of projects matter most to your community, and how important is it to bring people along in that process? So your answers will help us shift into one of the most practical tools communities can use, which is a brownfield inventory. Mm. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for that. It's clear that priorities vary, but most of you see real value in getting the community involved. So that's really encouraging. So how do you turn all those ideas, opportunities, and challenges into a coordinated game plan? So that's where a brownfield inventory can come in. And we're going to talk about how it works, how it can become your go-to tool for moving from vision to action. And there are multiple ways you can go about getting a brownfield inventory. And we'll talk about that as well. So a brownfield inventory is critical. It helps you prioritize sites, track progress, and align funding opportunities. It isn't just data collection. It's what you use for strategic planning. With a solid inventory, you're no longer reacting, you're leading the charge in brownfields. So one of the tools that I want to go over in depth that is at your disposal is the Brownfield Inventory tool. Our Brownfields Inventory tool, we call it BIT for short, makes site tracking really easy. It's an online platform where you can enter site details, manage documents, and monitor funding. It keeps everything organized so you can stay proactive. Another thing that is really helpful for communities is that it is password protected and it's not publicly available. So it's not something that everyone can see or access. It's owned by the data owner, and then the data owner can then share that data or have other users involved where they can see it or add to it. So with Bit, you do own your own data. It's yours. It's password protected, only shared if you choose. Like I mentioned, it ensures community, even with staff changes, and TAB is here to support you every step of the way. And we know with a lot of communities with limited capacity or a lot of turnover, a lot of information is sometimes lost. So this is a really great way to have a tool that can keep the consistency of the information that your community stores. There is also a bit mobile option, which makes it very easy for you to get community members involved or allows multiple people to add to the data. It allows you to capture photos, site data, GIS coordinates directly from the field. Even offline, the app saves your work and syncs once you're connected to it. So it makes field assessments very quick and very efficient. So I'm just going to go through the next series of slides very quickly. It's more for your reference after the fact to kind of walk you through it if you need help on how to get started with a BIT tool for smaller communities. Getting started is pretty simple. You essentially have to create a free KSU TAB account, which is not difficult. You just log in, and that's how you set up your program. Whether you're managing a few sites or an entire community inventory, BIT will scale to your needs. So it's very malleable. So this just kind of walks you through the process online, how to get started. It gives you a quick how-to and walks you through things. You're going to want to select a program. The program name is going to be really important, but you can have multiple programs. So let's say you want to do one specific cleanup, and that's the program that you want to keep track of data on, or you want to do an entire community, or you want to do it by neighborhood. You can create as many or as little programs as you want to kind of organize your data. So I'm going to go through a bunch of options and just to give you an idea of what types of things that you can store in here so that the point of this is to show you that when you have brownfields, you can utilize this data to store pretty much every aspect of your brownfield so that it's essentially all in one place. So if you are getting assessment activities done, you can not only track what assessments have been done, but you can also put the reports directly in here to save those reports attached to the brownfield that they are for. You can put information about, what the use was, what it's been, what contaminates you do or do not know about, any media that's been affected, who has done any surveys, what historical information you have or have not been able to gather. This is the information about any grants you might have received for it, and you can track grant information on here as well. Any specific sampling data that you might want to add. If you start getting into the cleanup, this allows you to put everything in that you might need for cleanup. Again, to track what you found, what gets cleaned up. As you move forward, to track productivity or linear movement on a site, you can put in information about redevelopment and reuse details so you can kind of see, what effort was put into this versus what you got out of it, how much money was made, how many jobs were created. You can talk about what current infrastructure is available so that when you have a redeveloper come to your community and say, hey, I need a property that has these types of infrastructure already available, you can find that and you can search by that. And then it also talks about things as such as climate adaptation and mitigation and future use. Another really great aspect is BIT's mapping features, which allow you to see where your sites are geographically, which is super helpful. You can switch between map views, zoom in, and even use Street View to visualize the area. This is especially helpful when presenting to stakeholders or applying for grants. So when you enter a site address in BIT, the map drops a marker and autofills the coordinates. So you can adjust the location by dragging the marker, and BIT will update the address and latitude and longitude fields automatically for you. Bitmap works essentially just like Google Maps. You can switch between map and satellite view, zoom in, go full screen, tilt for different angles, drop into Street View, and even move the marker to adjust the site's address and coordinates. To enter Street View, you just drag the pegman, just like in Google Maps, to the blue line on the map, and you'll get a ground view level of your site. And then to exit Street View, you click the arrow in the upper left to leave the screen and move the cursor to the top and click X and get out. So it gives you a lot of great visuals so you can not only look at it, but you can provide that information to any developer who wants to look at it. And then also, more importantly, you can also see all of your maps, or I'm sorry, all of your sites on a map at the same time. So it gives you a bigger picture and it helps you navigate it in that way. So when it's time to share your inventory with funders, partners, or developers, BIT makes exporting super easy. You can choose which sites and data fields to include, so you don't have to include everything that you keep track of. Ensuring your presentations are clear, concise, and impactful instead of labored with a lot of unnecessary data. All of your exported files from the all sites map would include basic info and can be used in other mapping tools to locate your sites as well, including GIS. So if you already have site data in spreadsheets, BIT allows you to import that information to create a centralized, organized inventory. So this saves time and ensures nothing falls through the cracks. So if you have somebody else collecting data or want to compile multiple data sources, you can put it all into one location. And then when you're exporting your data, you can just choose your program, filter your sites, select what info you need, and it will generate an Excel file with your selected data ready to share or analyze. So beyond inventories, BIT helps you track site complaints, inspections, enforcement actions. It can inform your prioritization process and demonstrate proactive management when applying for funding or partnerships. So it has a lot of different utilizations. You can utilize it to its full capacity, or you can utilize it for just what you want. And that makes it very malleable. It's also been a huge resource for very small or rural communities in increasing the capacity for a community. All right, so just a couple more questions based on all the information we've thrown at you so far. We want to know where you could use the most support and how your community feels about the resources available to move brownfield projects forward. These insights will help us talk about what a brownfield inventory can actually unlock. All right. Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing. Whether you're confident or just starting out, one thing's clear. Having a solid brownfield inventory can be a game changer, especially when applying for the funding and grants that you guys are interested in. It's often the first thing for funders, and it's also the first thing that agencies and partners or collaborators will ask for. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sally Gladwell to talk about what that inventory can actually lead to and how it can set the stage for everything from grant readiness to site reuse planning and community visioning.
Thank you, Roxanne. Roxanne gave me a great launching off point, having reviewed the Brownfield inventory tool. Brownfield inventories are such a crucial foundational step in understanding the environmental conditions and redevelopment potential for a community. Next slide, please. So we're going to look at how we've been able to put some of these inventories in action. And a couple of inventories that you're looking at here are examples of what Mannequin Smith has pulled together for a couple of different communities. And like Roxanne said, brownfield inventories can cover a whole spectrum of size of area. So you might be looking at a corridor, you might be looking at a whole community-wide area, or just a defined area of interest for that city or village. And so on the upper left, you see here a look at brownfields citywide. This is actually the city of Toledo, and you see the blue areas mapped, identifying brownfields that are then tallied in the table on the left. And so what that does is provide the community leaders an at a glance view of where sort of the hotspots are, the areas with the most disincentive and the most potential as well. And so attached then to that That map is a report that goes a little more in-depth than a matrix that provides, again, an at a glance, but with a little more detail of what the environmental conditions are at those particular properties, and then what some of those property attributes are, because that's important in knowing what the potential is for redevelopment. So size, ownership, tax status, is it in tax arrears, or might we need to use a tool like a land bank to come in and help facilitate a property transfer and a cleanse of the title. The brownfield inventory you see on the lower right is a corridor inventory that looks at one particular inventory in town. This is also in Toledo, but one particular historic corridor with a fair number of brownfields on it. You see those outlined in yellow. And again, the accompanying table, so that all of the stakeholders, whether they be the community leaders or potential developers or other investors, partners, can look at the map and the table and get a good screening level indication of what the constraints and opportunities might be. And then those are accompanied by a deeper look and analysis that are those results are included in the report and matrix. Next slide, please. What we try to do is make sure that everything that goes into a brownfield inventory does serve as an important screening level, but it also builds onto the next step. Need there be a next step of, as Roxanne described, a phase 1 environmental site assessment. So recall, like Roxanne said, that's a look at existing data, historical data and current data about a site without collecting new information such as soil samples or groundwater samples or other new data collection. So it's really a coalescence of existing data and analysis of that. So anything we build into our brownfield inventory, we want to make sure is a foundational step, can be folded into a phase 1 environmental site assessment if needed. Therefore, nothing goes to waste in your brownfield inventory. So here's some examples of different sites that have benefited from a start at the inventory level and served as a great sort of attention getter to say, well, these are sites that merit some additional assessment to understand what's happening there. And you can see on that lower right picture, there were some suspected tanks, and in fact, those tanks were found, buried tanks that were discovered during a phase 2 environmental site assessment. Next slide, please. Another powerful mechanism that brownfield inventories serve is to launch some re-envisioning plans or master plans, some concepts for what might exist, what might replace that brownfield. Community needs change over time. And so if a site that once served as an industrial space but is situated in a residential neighborhood now needs to serve a different purpose, that's where those inventories can, again, because they have that at a glance advantage, can help visualize the landscape and what is really needed. What are some of the community needs and desires? And that's where you can get stakeholders engaged and really start to look at what are the reuse opportunities and what might we need to overcome in order to capitalize on those opportunities. So what you see here are some reuse plans that emerged from brownfield inventories, and take a closer look at the possibilities for different brownfields that were identified on the inventory. And these are based on input from the residents and from business owners in town who said, here's what the real need is. And these particular, changes at these particular locations will be catalytic and help provide a ripple effect for the rest of the community. Next slide, please. Brownfield inventories also are a great tool to launch into community engagement that's meaningful. Just like I mentioned on the last slide about getting stakeholder input, we've used brownfield inventories to help communicate in an efficient way out to, residents, business owners, community leaders, potential developers, and other investors, and then other project partners, organizations in town that also have a stake in what happens across the community. Having that inventory is a great communication tool to be able to say, here's what we're looking at so far. This is screening level with, fairly minimal investment, but a lot of information. And it allows us to then have conversations about what might happen. This is an example of a flyer with for a project, a resiliency plan project, with a whole host of stakeholders and interested partners. And having that inventory has been extraordinarily powerful to be able to engage folks and solicit their input, because they're looking at something that's meaningful, and not so detailed that it becomes overwhelming, but the data are real and connected. They're interconnected and meaningful. Next slide. Okay, time for another poll. When we want to take brownfield inventories from vision to reality, we want to know how likely is your community to actually pursue a brownfields project in the near future. So some of you may already have projects moving along, others just trying to ascertain what might be possible. Where does your community fall on the spectrum of action over the next couple of years? So if you can respond to the poll questions that are on the screen for round 4 poll. What do you believe is the biggest untapped opportunity for brownfields in your community? Make one selection there. And the second question, how likely is your organization to pursue brownfields redevelopment projects in the next 2 years? So a lot of desire for economic revitalization. And there is a very strong connection between transforming brownfields and revitalizing the economy. Okay. So next I'm going to take us through some visuals and a case study out of Toledo, Ohio, our beloved downtown on both sides of the river, with a very long history of industry. And what makes this area exciting, and you'll see the picture shortly, is that this is now the most booming part of our community, but for many years it sat idle. It was first industrial development there was the Toledo Edison power plant from 1918 to 1993. Next slide. We call this the east side of the river. That's the side that the power plant was located on. There's some of the historic pictures of the Acme plant back in the day. Next slide. And there's an overview. You can see the tanks there, you can see settling ponds and the Acme power plant, very heavily industrialized and right on our community's greatest natural resource, which is the Maumee River, which empties into Lake Erie. Lake Erie being one of the 5 Great Lakes. And for those who don't know, the Great Lakes is the largest source of fresh water on the planet. So it's really important to our area. It's our source of drinking water. And many of you may remember that back in 2014, we made global news and even made the cover of National Geographic magazine when we couldn't touch or consume our drinking water for several days because of the harmful algal blooms on Lake Erie and near our water intake. So that was a wake-up call to how we develop our riverfront areas and how we take care of our greatest resource, which is Lake Erie and the rivers connected to it. Next slide, please. So you can see the industrial use is really just evolving over time. This is the site in 2000, which really just a quarter of a century ago. And then 2016, as things continue to change and the footprint of the industrial use is reduced. By 2011, we've had some demolition there. Next slide, 2016. By 2016, the site was starting to be transferred to multiple different owners. There was a total of 5 ribbon cuttings at this site. This was referred to as the Marina and Arena District area. 5 ribbon cuttings, only one of them came to fruition, and that is what the site is used for now. But we had multiple investors from in and outside of the United States. This fancy road was built there with some lovely streetlights. It was locally referred to as the road to nowhere, because it was like, setting the table and nobody showed up for dinner. So it's just remained a well-lit road for a number of years as investors came and left, and nobody knew what to do with the site. They said, well, we'd really like it to be green space, and well, we'd really like it to be residential. Well, no, we'd really like it to be commercial. And so next slide. It took the fortitude of Metro Parks Toledo. This is now 2025 photo. Metro Parks Toledo, which has since been ranked the #1 park district, large park district in all of the United States. It's held that title for the past 5 years. It was Metro Parks Toledo that stepped up and said, actually, yes, and it can be green space, it can be residential, it can be commercial, it can be private and public. It can be all of those things, and it should be all of those things. And now what we have here is Glass City Metro Park, and on each side of the river, 2.5 miles of Riverwalk, so a total of 5 miles of Riverwalk. It's called the Glass City Riverwalk. This, what we see here again, is Glass City Metro Park. It's been wildly successful and is the largest economic development driver in town today. And but Metro Parks didn't do it on their own. They, of course, started with an awareness of where the brownfields in the area are, what the brownfield conditions on this site are. Next slide, please. Because as I mentioned, there were so there you see the site in a little more of its glory there with that beautiful rendering. Next slide. This site benefited from a couple of very large grants that were previously offered from what was called the Clean Ohio Revitalization Fund, or CORF. It was administered by our Ohio Department of Development. That program has evolved. It no longer exists in its current reality, but back in the day, that was a really powerful mechanism to fund the environmental assessments and cleanup at the site and to establish some covenants not to sue. Next slide, please. And again, all of these started with brownfield inventories and an awareness of what the conditions are and what needs to be further investigated. So that's that couple of CORF grants, which totaled $6 million. There were several phases of the cleanup. The mostly contaminated soil from the power plant. So we had fly ash there and a lot of volatile organic compounds and what we call PAHs, metals, and PCBs, which I think folks are familiar with. And then the buildings were loaded with asbestos containing materials. If you think about a power plant and its need for being fire retardant, there was a lot of asbestos that needed to come out of those buildings, over 1 million square feet of asbestos containing material. And then construction of the marina where the excavated soil would be used was, there's an engineering control there. So a cap, a 2-foot cap to deny any contact with remaining contamination. In Ohio, we have what we refer to as the Voluntary Action Program, which is truly a voluntary cleanup program. It's risk-based, so it acknowledges that not all clean is the same. Not all sites need to be the same level of clean. So if you're developing something, redeveloping something as a residence or residential property, that will necessarily mean it's got to be cleaner, right? You may have little children there playing in the dirt in the backyard and putting their hands in their mouths. That's different from having adults spend 8 hours a day at work at an industrial site. So different exposure levels, and so therefore different levels of clean. So this required a 2-foot cap to deny any contact with any residual contamination. Next slide, please. And then that is what led to, you can see some more images here of the Riverwalk. The Metro Park's goal is to have this be the best Riverwalk in the nation. Next slide, please. You can see the rebirth there. See the green roof on the what's called the Glass City Pavilion. It's a space, meeting space, and event space. You can barely see in there the ice ribbon. That's also a roller skating ribbon in the summer. Access to the water. There's public art there. There's commercial spaces, residential, which you can't quite see on this aerial. I think it shows up on a future slide. And some cultural resources there. You can see what the Schoonamaker ship. It's an old ship that's available for touring. It serves as a museum. So it's really, it's that yes and. It's a conglomeration of all the things that are important to a community. Next slide, please. Metro Parks would be the first to say they borrowed examples from other parks. They did their homework and looked at this example of a play set came from a park in Denver, but it's meant to mimic our birds of prey here in Toledo. We're an important flyway for migrating birds, and so that's what this play space is fashioned after. Next slide. There's the ice ribbon. And again, in the summer, it's a roller skating ribbon, but this has been wildly popular and accessible to all in the community. And just, it's completely activated the space downtown that was, remember, an idle brownfield for decades. This is where the road to nowhere eventually led. Next slide, please. There's a little bit of the breakdown of some of the investment. It was a combined community effort. And again, once you're able to start with a brownfield inventory and share those results openly with a whole host of stakeholders and invite them to the table to say, here's what we're grappling with, here's where our challenges are and our opportunities are. How can your organization engage and help transform this? And that's what Metro Parks did. They relied on their levy power, and they worked hard to earn the public's trust and gain their votes to pass their levies. And they sought private funding through philanthropists and foundations, sought grants very aggressively on their own and with project partners, and then also earned some tax increment financing benefits. Next slide, please. The ripple effects of this redevelopment really just cannot be overstated. As I say, this is the largest and most powerful economic development driver in our community right now in Northwest Ohio. And for those of you who have been in or around Toledo, you've no doubt heard of Glass City Metro Park or Glass City Riverwalk. It will be featured at the National Brownfields Conference next week in Columbus. It'll be featured on a poster at a presentation and has been nominated for, its executive director has been nominated for a People Phoenix Award. Next slide, please. Here's some of the economic results from this brownfield redevelopment. Again, we go back to that poll and your expressed interest in economic revitalization. Here, this points to some real data on how key brownfield revitalization is to economic development. Owner-occupied homes in this area grew from 19% in 2019, prior to Metro Parks transformation, to over 50% just 4 years later. That's huge. The median sale price in East Toledo for homes went from 29,000 to 70,000, doubling the value of homes. So just really powerful data there. Next slide, please. Okay, I hope that was a helpful tour through a couple of sites showing you what can happen with attention to brownfield revitalization.
Thank you so much, Sally. And I can attest, I've been to Glass City Metro Park with my 3 kids, and it was fabulous. And I think that this example does a really great job of showing how knowing what you have and having done assessments and knowing what you're starting with is how you're going to attract those redevelopers. So a final quick poll question, just to have an idea of whether or not you'd be interested in a workshop with more. Yes. Great. So we will work on that with more successful brownfield redevelopment case studies and potentially showing you some collaboration and partnerships. It's obviously different for every project and every location. And there's always tricky things that need to be navigated. If there's any other topic that we've kind of covered here or didn't cover here that you think you would also like us to dive in more to in a future webinar, please post that in the chats so we can kind of have an idea on that. You can go to the next slide. Once again, if you have not yet, before you dash off, to save your brownfields in your community, if you could help us by filling out the survey, if you haven't done it already, click on or type in the link or put in the QR code on your phone. It's quick, painless, and lets us know how to make future sessions even better. And we would appreciate it. And then I'm also going to pull up another QR code for you guys to look at /scan for me. If you want to stay in the loop or chat with me or another tab member, you can scan this QR code to sign up for our mailing list as well to know about national and regional webinars or workshops that happen. There's no pressure, just friendly humans, free resources, and no spam, promise. And then I'm going to leave this contact information up for you if you would like to contact me or Sally regarding the case study or any of the information here. You can feel free to reach out, and I can also connect you to your local tab provider if you're in a different region. And then I guess from there we can move into questions if we have any.
Thank you again, Roxanne and Sally. So we do, let's see, let's take a look here. So we have one question from Mary. It would be great to get an idea on the capital outlay and financing. Were there any economic incentives used for the redevelopment? I think this might be for Sally.
Yeah.
And thank you for the question, Mary. Is that with respect to Glass City Metro Park and Riverwalk?
Yeah, probably.
Whoever has control of the slides, would it be possible to go back to that slide with the circular
Yes.
diagram on it? It's a great question, Mary. And so I want to, this is sort of big picture. There's a lot of detail behind this, but yes, there's a breakdown of the grants that were contributed. And just for example, some of these grants included US EPA funding for environmental site assessment, phase one, inventories, phase ones and phase twos, state money through Ohio Department of Development, Ohio EPA, through KSU TAB for additional assessment. There was even some Great Lakes Restoration Initiative money dedicated to this at one point through all of the vacancy and turnover of interest at this site. Remember I mentioned that 2-foot cap of protective cover? That started to erode over time, and there were deep ruts that were developing there. And the city at that time, the city of Toledo, owned the property, and they were at risk of violating their covenants not to sue because those ruts were getting to be close to 2 feet deep. So Great Lakes Restoration Initiative grant for beneficial use of dredge material on a brownfield was used to, and this was actually the first beneficial use of dredge material on a brownfield in the state of Ohio. What we did was use that money to secure some clean dredge material from the Toledo-Lucas County Port Authority's storage facility. We had to remove the invasives. It was covered with invasive species, so we had to remove those, bring it over to the site, which was actually very helpful to the Port Authority because it created some space in their facility. And then we're able to use that dredge material to basically just cover and then vegetate the site and protect the brownfield covenants not to sue. So that was another source of funding that ultimately, played a key role in this long-term project of, assessing the site, cleaning up the site, and then ultimately transforming it into this beautiful activated space. Does that help answer the question?
Does, thank you so much. I was
You're welcome.
beyond this particular question, or this case study, if there were, any future, projects, that were, a part of the discussion, if there could be maybe more detailed, capital outlay for the project to be realized. This definitely answered the question.
Okay. Yeah, and sometimes it's, just being really inventive and again looking at the challenges, the brownfield conditions are a challenge, but how can that be turned into an opportunity? So with that Great Lakes Restoration Initiative grant, who would have thought a Great Lakes Restoration Initiative grant would be dedicated to a brownfield site? We normally think about that as like ecological restoration, but as a way of saying like, how can we be creative with these different sources of funding, to knit them together into something that can be really, really transformative?
I think related, we have a question. How long did it take for the park district to go from start to finish with the site? And is there additional work still happening?
Well, that's a great question. So Metro Parks acquired the site, I believe, in 2020. And the project is still underway. The Glass City Metro Park is completed with phase 2. There's some additional things they're working on, an urban campground, and some other exciting amenities there. And then the Riverwalk itself is not quite complete, but getting there. So the end, I think the end of 2026 is the projected end, but it always does come down to funding. And they did have some project partners that hit some financial snags of their own, like for example, ProMedica Hospital, which at one point was going gangbusters in this area. They had committed $10 million and then eventually had to cancel their commitment. So that's a $10 million gap that Metro Parks has had to go out and seek. And as many or all of you on this call probably know, there's been concerns about federal funding freezes this year. So that has certainly affected Metro Parks. So it's like a matter of being able to use the momentum they have to continue to push that forward and complete the Riverwalk. For anyone who's going to be in Chicago next week at the National Brownfield Conference, please come and see our poster, and our presentation is on the morning of the 6th. So I think that's the Wednesday morning.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. This is a longer question, so we'll see if help us walk through EPA funding applications, specifically the outline of the budget. In this case, they failed to know that we needed to include a line for personnel to fund our administration of the grant. So we didn't include it. We tried to amend it, only to be told that nothing could be done. So now we were managing $500,000 without any compensation.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate. So what I would say about that, I'm going to say two things. One, reach out to me and I will see how we can help you. KSU TAB, one of the things that we do is that we review grant applications. We help with the process after you receive grants when you're trying to go through trying to write an RFP or anything like that, going through your work plan. And we also have quite a few workshops, two of which are coming up at the end of August on how to write a grant, which we will go over that part. But now that it's already kind of been done, we're just going to have to try and work through how to help you with that, considering it wasn't in your line item or budget. So that was definitely something that I would just have you reach out to me on, and then encourage anyone else who is planning on applying or looking into applying a grant to attend our workshop at the end of August. And if you sign up on the Let's Connect slide, you can go in there and you can register for that workshop. It's virtual at the end of August.
I just want to insert, thank you for bringing that question to light. You've probably just educated a whole host of folks on the phone or on this call or on this webinar from not making the same, not having the same challenge in the future. So thanks for your courage in bringing that up. That's it's helpful for us to talk about these things and the potential pitfalls.
Yeah, that's hard.
So for those who are interested in finding some of the creative sources of funding that Sally had brought up, are there, I mean, as part of just connecting with KSU TAB, do you send out some of these obscure types of grants that are available or anything if people are interested?
A lot of what we do for communities is project specific or community specific, and we can create something called like a resource roadmap. So depending on what projects
Okay.
you're working on, one of the technical assistance things that we provide is trying to find the best resources for whatever you're working on. Because funding varies and fluctuates from year to year, location wise, nonprofits, stuff like that. Nothing's really consistent. So we don't really send out, every once in a while we'll send stuff out about updates about federal, or if there's new grant programs in your state, sometimes we'll send those out. But the most part, we help with technical assistance based on you reaching out and us determining where you need the most help and what funding is going to help you best.
Okay, so that roadmap would really be sort of a starting point on all.
It would, and for a project such as Sally's, there's only so much that we can provide a resource roadmap for that on. A lot of that came out of the redevelopers who showed interest and the collaboration between private and public sector within the city and those relationships that they have.
Okay, great, great. Anybody else has any questions? Feel free to put them in the chat. Otherwise, we're getting close to 1 o'clock here, so I think we stayed perfectly on time. But thank you, Roxanne. Thank you, Sally. If anybody has questions, you know, they provided their contact information in the slides, which Paula provided in the chat as well. And feel free to follow up with them. You know, they're open, they're willing to help. So please feel free to reach out. And hopefully soon we'll put together a follow-up with some case studies, because it looks like a lot of people were interested in that as well. So thank you, Roxanne and Sally. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.